Hey, let's get started by discovering the application we want to build in this course. So we want to create an e-commerce application. We are going to put ourselves in the shoes of an e-commerce owner who wants to display product on a website and customers to buy those. So on the homepage, I can see a flagship product that is the most important right now for my e-commerce, and then a list of products. I can also see the products on the specific page that just displays the same list. And if I go back to the home, I can pre-order the flagship product. So the user can enter their email and pre-order the product. We can see that the call to action here automatically increases anytime a user pre-orders. It increases for the current user, but also if other customers are pre-ordering the product. Our e-commerce application also includes an administration area for the e-commerce owner that contains a form that lets us create a new product. So let's create an awesome course on Newline at the price of $1,000 because it's really a very good course. Save change. And now we should be able to see the results on the product list and the home page. So if I go to the product list, yeah, indeed, I see an awesome course on Newline for $1,000. So it's up to date. What I want to point out here is that we want the e-commerce to be very fast, to have a good user experience, but also to display dynamic data. And the whole point of this course is that it's not that obvious. It needs to blend two techniques, static rendering and revalidation, using Next.js server action. So we have demonstrated a website that works, but a website that works is actually the bare acceptable minimum for a website. In real life, an e-commerce owner wants a website that brings revenue. And the thing is that performance and revenue are highly correlated. There are multiple studies around, like this one from Akamai's, that prove that a slow website will bring less conversion. I got some numbers with me. For instance, a 3 seconds delay will make you lose half of your visitors. Walmart noticed that on the contrary, each second one increased conversion by 2 points. Google noticed that the average mobile web page takes 15 seconds to load. So that's a huge progression margin. And there are numerous academical and business research that goes in the same direction. A fast website brings revenue, a slow website loses revenue. So we want to focus on performances for this website. We want it to load instantly. If I reload the page, I get the content immediately. Here, I'm kind of cheating because, of course, the website is running locally on my computer, so there is no real network connection. But we will see that it is still possible to test performance locally, and we can show that this website is optimal in terms of CPU consumption and thus in terms of performances and speed of loading. So we want to build an e-commerce website and we want to make it fast. In Next.js, speed is highly related to the way we render the content. And in Next.js, we have 3 ways of rendering the content. We have server-side rendering, static seed generation, and client-side rendering. I don't really like those wordings because I think they are confusing. They exist for historical reasons mainly. I prefer to think in terms of where and when. So we have 2 where. We have server and client. Okay, we have server-side rendering and client-side rendering in the user's browser. And we have, for server-side, we have 2 whens. We have build time rendering and request time rendering. So if I summarize, we have request time server-side rendering. You open the URL, the server computes the HTML and gives you back the whole HTML for the page. We have build time server-side rendering. The servers compute HTML ahead of time. And when you open a URL, the HTML is already ready and it's just sent to you. And then we have client-side rendering. In the browser, JavaScript can update the content. So it's important to figure the right kind of render we want for a given content of the application because it impacts performance. Request time server-side rendering will do a new computation for each request hitting the website. So if you have 3 million users, you got 3 million requests and 3 million updates, 3 million computation to display the page. And intuitively, you can understand that it's not very efficient for a website that displays the same content for every user. Static rendering is the most performance because you compute stuff ahead of time and then display to the user. But it's less dynamic. What happens if you have personalized content? What happens if you want to update the list of products? This will be the core subject of this course. And then client-side rendering happens in the browser. So the thing is that it happens a bit later compared to server-side rendering because you have to download the web page, to download the JavaScript, and to run it. Most often, server-side rendering will complement client-side rendering. The server pre-renders content, and then the client makes it interactive. So we can blend those intelligently. The way of rendering the content matters a lot, and in this course, we are going to focus on my favorite, which is static rendering, and we will try to get the best out of static rendering. I think it's sometimes underestimated. Developers often think that it's limited, but you can actually push it very far, get a performant website with up-to-date content. And that's what we are going to do in this course. In this e-commerce application, we are actually using the three ways of rendering content. The product list is rendered statically, server-side and ahead of time. And from the code, it's actually not that obvious. The thing is that it's actually the default Next. So when you just fetch data from your database, you are doing static server-side rendering. So that's how we get the products. We will dig this code more deeply later on. Okay, it's not obvious what it's doing, but it's actually quite intuitive when we write it. The pre-order section is mixing static server-side rendering and client-side rendering. Basically, when you get the number of pre-orders, what happens is that we render server-side the current number of customers, and then we update this number client-side. So the user doesn't have to refresh the browser to see new pre-orders in this call to action. And finally, we have a user info component, which is displaying user-specific data. User-specific data cannot be computed ahead of time because we don't know yet which user is going to access the website. So here we are using dynamic rendering, request time rendering, and we are reading the request cookies to get the authentication token of the user. That's how you do user personalization in Next.js server side. So that's the dynamic. We have product list static, pre-order section mixes static and client side, and user info is dynamic server side. You may have heard about React server components already. They have been brought by React 18 and Next.js 13 new architecture called the app router. So to understand server-side rendering, we have to also understand React server components. They are not exactly the same thing. The idea of the React server components is that it's rendered only on the server. You don't need client-side JavaScript to run them. And it was not true in previous versions of React. Even if you were using server-side rendering, you still had to do some client-side computation. You still needed client-side JavaScript for React to work. Now we can have pure server components, and those are React server components. They are easy to demonstrate. We can just disable JavaScript and reload the page. So I go to the developer tools, Ctrl+Shift+P is opening the command interface, and I can disable JavaScript, and I reload the page, and well, my e-commerce web page still works. It might not be, it doesn't just display, it actually works. I can navigate between pages. I can read the product list, I can see more products, and I can even pre-order a product with JavaScript disabled. Okay, you may think that most users will have JavaScript enabled anyway, so it might not make that much sense. But you have to think about it more in terms of performances. The need for JavaScript means a need for computation client-side. So it means slower websites. And again, slower websites, slower e-commerce websites are less revenue. I'm talking a lot about e-commerce in this course because that's the example that shows this issue the best. However, it's also true for a blog, for a company website, for a media website. For example, press websites are undergoing a lot of competition, so they have to stay very fast to get the user interested in their content. So React Server Components just tell us about the where. They are rendered server-side, but they can still be rendered either at build time, ahead of time when you compile the application before deploying it online, or at request time, when the user hits the URL and opens the website. Like right now, I'm sending new requests to the website. And the default is actually static rendering. If you don't use information coming from the request, the page will be static. So to demonstrate that, we can just add a log when the page renders and see that it's only logged when I compile the application. Let's do that. I'm adding a log to the home page, saying rendering homepage to be totally consistent. Then I will build the application. I will see a few logs from Next.js. Okay, it's creating my production build. There are a lot of warnings anyway. So it's rendering the product list because I also have logs there. And we can see here that it's rendering the homepage. Okay. It's rendering it twice. This is due to React strict mode. This is just a protection, something that protects you against accidental mistakes. Now I'm going to run the application, and we are going to see that the homepage is not rendered anymore on new request. So I'm running the application. I can open it in my browser, reload, check the logs on the server, and still nothing. It's not rendering the homepage again. So the default in Next is static rendering. Here I have a very simple home page that does nothing. It just displays a React component that also does nothing. It's just React JSX code. See, just display stuff, nothing much. So it's static because I'm not using request-specific information. React Server Component with static rendering is kind of the utopic scenario. You compute the page once ahead of time. There are no client-side computation. That's really the minimum computation you can have. And the minimum computations means the maximum performances. And the maximum performances means the best user experiences and then the best revenue conversion or whatever metrics you are interested for your website. That's something that we want to keep as long as possible. Sometimes it's not possible, sometimes it is. And we will show in this course that we can keep static around, we can keep React Server Components around for a long time, even when we have a tricky use case like wanting to display always fresh data. Here, the product list of our e-commerce website. When React Server Components have been released, there has been this joke around that React was kind of reinventing PHP. If you look at this code, we can see that it's just rendering some HTML and a React component. And if we open this React component, it's rendering more HTML and other React Server components. We can see that they are React Server components because they don't use the explicit use client directive. And they are not using any React hooks like useState. This means that they are not using any client-side JavaScript. In a way, they are just like templates, but written in JSX, the React syntax. But the thing is that React Server Components are still React. They integrate deeply with React client components. For instance, if I open the pre-order section here, we can see that it's using the use client directive and also hooks like use SWR, more on that on the fourth module. And also the use ID from React, which is just a way to get unique IDs for form inputs. So it's a client component, but it can be rendered on a server-side component. For instance, the pre-order page is not using use client. At the top, it's a server component, static as default until proven that it's dynamic data, but it can still render a client component. So the thing is that you have the choice of making some parts client, some parts server very intuitively with React Server Components.
Thanks for watching. If you want to keep learning, click the link in the description below.
Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps other students find our content.